All right, so welcome to preparing your students for their junior year, part two. This was a really important topic that there was a lot of feedback about and a lot of questions regarding, so we decided to do a part two, going into the end of the year and, potentially supporting our rising sophomores into their junior year. So I just want to go over if you hadn't gotten a chance to either watch the recording of part one, or if you had some questions regarding part one, I just want to go over a brief overview of what we went over then, and then we're going to kind of dive into some of those topics a little bit deeper. So the first thing that we talked about last time is communication, coming up with a plan, talking with your students, making sure you're both on the same page when it comes to what their post-secondary plans are, as well as how they're going to finish out high school. We talked a lot about encouraging students to find additional extracurriculars if they feel that they can fit them in, and start thinking about how they can align with their post-secondary plans if that's something they're interested in. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into extracurriculars today, so I don't want to spend too much time on that one. We went over a lot of terms that maybe some of you had or hadn't heard prior to our meeting. We went over what a school profile is. So school profile, really quick, is just, it tells colleges and the community what our school is about, how many students we've had, GPA scale, all of those sorts of things. We talked about what rigor meant in the coursework. So, what does that look like for your student? How many APs, regular classes, electives they're taking? We talked about that our GPA here at Schreiber is out of a 4.5. We give out a weighted GPA, that the last year of grades that colleges will see is junior year. And then we talked a lot about Naviance, standardized testing, which is ACT, SAT, AP exams, which we're going to dive into a little bit deeper today as well. What does financial aid mean for your family? And then we talked about how building relationships with teachers and counselors can really benefit them, throughout their junior year into their senior year. And the last thing that we spent time on last time was an organization system, which we can circle back to because I know we ran out of time last time. But we can talk about, what does an organization system look like, and why is it important for, going into junior year, and what does that look like? So that was just a quick recap of, things we went over last time. Before we begin, are there any specific thoughts or questions regarding those topics we went over last time, or anything you felt like we didn't finish?
Yeah, thank you very much for the explanation. I don't have that much questions in regards to the topics that we went through last time. But just to briefly explain my situation, maybe I already have talked or discussed about it, but the thing is that I might get a new assignment to another country. So of course, I need to leave USA.
Okay,
While
so
yeah.
this might be something that you want to talk to your student's counselor about, because it seems like a very one-on-one situation. So we want to make sure that, we're supporting you and giving you the best information possible. So I would connect with your student's counselor about a very specific situation like that.
Oh, okay. I
Okay.
thought that this. Okay, so this is not the time that.
Oh, she
So
just,
yeah, so I would just connect with your student counselor. We can connect after as well, but I would connect with your student counselor. Okay. Someone just asked if there are links to the video from part one that you can reshare. Absolutely. So there is a link. I can try to pop it into the chat before the end of today, but there's also a link in the newsletter. All the past recordings that this director sends out, the director of guidance, there's a link to past recordings in there, but I'll try to pop it into the chat before the end. Okay. All right, so if there are okay, you're welcome. If there aren't any other questions, we'll begin. So the first thing I want to talk about today, which we didn't get a chance to touch upon last time, was the opportunity for your students this year to develop study habits and a study space. We touched a lot upon post-secondary opportunities and what does that mean for the college search, career search, what do all of those terms mean, things of that nature, but we didn't really touch upon, how to support them for the academic rigor of junior year. And I think that's just something important to touch upon.
Yes.
So I'm just going to remind all of you, if you're not speaking at the time, just try to put yourself on mute so we can all hear each other. So a lot of students are able to take their classes. They're able to either, study on the go or study during school hours if they have an off period. And, a lot of our students tend to do very, very well. But I think it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to make sure that you are talking with your student on how to develop those study skills and where do they study and how they're studying, because when they get to either a post-secondary option or even in the workspace, they need to know how to manage their time. So I think it's important to identify a space either, outside of the home, in the home, where they can dedicate just to their studies. And then, have a conversation with them on how are they studying? What are they doing to study? What does that look like to them? Do they have a process right now? Do they not? And kind of talking through that with them. And it may differ for subject to subject. And if they are having an issue in a certain subject, like they think they have a study plan down for, 3 out of their 4 subjects or whatever it may be, but this one subject is giving them, trouble, I suggest they reach out to their teacher. The teachers here are great resources as well, and they'll be able to kind of give them some tips on how they think they should be studying, what are good study habits, and what does that look like for your student in particular, and they'll be able to work, one-on-one with them during extra help hours. So I just felt it was something, important. I don't think there's, enough about that because our students really do tend to do quite well. But you want to make sure that they're developing those habits. So later on, when they go on to their post-secondary, careers, they'll already have those habits in place, and it will also help them get them through their junior and senior year, which are very busy with all of those post-secondary things that they are planning for. Okay, so again, if there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. I know we kind of glazed over last time, standardized tests and what does that mean for our juniors and what does that look like? So I wanted to start with standardized tests because, we're hearing a lot about right now, and if you're not in that college frame yet, that's okay, but we're hearing a lot about test optional, not test optional. Some of our Ivy League schools are going back to requiring tests. Some schools are going back to requiring tests. Some schools are committing to staying test optional. So it's really confusing out there. And it's really, understanding how to proceed and what to do could be really challenging. So what we recommend is that a student sits for at least, 1 or 2 of the exams, so that way they have a test score on record. It's really, really important to have the test scores on record, so that way if a student wants to apply to a test optional school and not apply with scores, that's great. But if a student then decides to apply to a school that requires test scores, or the school changes what the admissions requirements are and require test scores all of a sudden, the student is set and they're not unable to apply to that school. We also talked a little bit about, which I want to dive into a little bit more, which test is right for each student. Each student the ACT versus the SAT. The ACT and SAT, it really depends on the student and how they take exams. If the student's not sure, I would sign the student up for the PSAT if they have not already taken it in the fall, and then that can give them a good indicator of if the SAT seems like a good test for them to continue with in their space in taking the virtual SAT. So, okay. So that's about standardized tests. The test optional piece is something that you're going to continue to speak about with your counselor as your counselor, as you continue to have the junior college night next year, and you continue to have junior conferences, which is a one-on-one with your counselor about what does the college process look like for your students. The other standardized test that you may hear a lot about, and they're given through College Board as well, is if any of your students are in AP classes. So, preparing your students to take those AP exams, they could count as college credit. So, depending on the school you're going to and depending on what score the student gets. So that's something important to understand as well. What are those AP tests mean for your students' post-secondary career? Okay, so I said we're going to dig a little bit deeper into extracurriculars. So we spoke about extracurriculars last time and what they mean for our students. So some students right now are scheduled out to the brim with extracurriculars, and that's great, and they should continue to do them if they enjoy them, and feel really passionate about them and get even deeper involved into them. But for our students that may or may not have joined anything yet, there's still time. So that's the important message I wanted to drive home today. Our students who are rising juniors, so our sophomores currently, they still have time to join things. So what I recommend is, we talked a little bit about like extracurricular / college resume last time. Start doing one with your student. Have your student kind of lay out everything that they're doing, academically, if they're in sports, if they do clubs, if they work, if they're caretaking, whatever it may be. Lay it out and then kind of lay out a weekly schedule and see, how busy the student is, how many hours a week do these things take up, and then kind of take an inventory. So it's important to do that right now. And, I'm not talking about right this moment because I know our students are preparing for AP exams and, gearing up for the end of the year. But I would say even June or beginning of July, take that inventory with your students. See where the gaps are. See if there's more they could be involved in. Or maybe the inventory is going to tell you, they're really packed out, and the free time that they do have, they'll either be studying, or taking some self-care time for themselves. So it's just important to get an idea of what space your student falls in right now, because there's so much more time where they can join things. And when they come back in the beginning of junior year, you and your student already want to know what they want to join or what activities may be of interest to them. So joining junior year, the beginning of junior year, is not an issue. What I caution students not to do is, you'll have your junior conferences with your counselors, towards the end of your junior year, middle to end of your junior year. I caution students not to have that junior conference and then sign up for like 6 clubs, right after that. So they're only in them for about 6 months before they apply. But if they can join things at the beginning of their junior year and get involved, whether it be a sport, like I said, a club, get a job, or they're caretaking, and they can show that full year of commitment prior to applying to college, that would be a very good idea. So are there any questions regarding clubs, activities, extracurriculars? No. Okay, so good question. What clubs are still open right now for kids to join? So they can find it a bunch of different ways. There are some clubs will do Google Classroom, some clubs will make announcements, some clubs will, their TVs in the school scrolls, they'll, advertise that they're still looking for members. So you really want to find what students are interested in. And in the beginning of the year, we also have a club fair where students can go and walk through and see what they want to join. So, that would probably be a good idea if they're not really sure what's offered here or what they want to join. That would be a good idea for them to walk through if they think they have time to join something and put some time into something. With that, I want to touch upon leadership. We talk a lot about leadership and what, that means for our students and their post-secondary options and, how do you get that in their junior year and how do you support that for your students? So leadership in the form of, being a captain on a team, taking initiative in a club and being a president or vice president, that's some ways that leadership come out and, can be shown. But for some of my students, the reason I'm touching on this, for some of our students, that's not really what they want to do, but they still want to show leadership. So what I recommend for those students is you can still show leadership in other ways, and it doesn't have to be, being a president, vice president, or captain, or the traditional ways we think of leadership. If a student wants to take an office spot in a club, but maybe be the secretary or the treasurer, something that's not very public facing. Those are other ways for students to show leadership skills. I also think that, colleges, workspaces, Post Schreiber, they're really just looking for students to be passionate about something and get engaged in something. And it all kind of counts as leadership. And, if students can help mentor, underclassmen, and what does that look like? But they're really looking for students to be engaged in something and to continue through with their passion. Okay, so we talked a lot about, how to prepare, what to do, what types of activities can students do to prepare for their junior year, and what does that look like? So something I also want to touch upon is if your student is college seeking, what does it mean to find the right match for them for college? So, there's a lot of things when it comes to college, and at the beginning of the college process, almost every college can be an option. It really depends, how students continue to do in their junior year, what does their grades look like, what they're involved in, what major they may want to study. But how do you narrow it down? How do you even start the conversation at the beginning of junior year or even over the summer going into junior year? And I would say the first thing to do is sit down with your student. And if anyone has been on parent webinars with me, they know I always talk about open communication, having that open conversation and, get a plan together that you both like. But, you're sitting down with your student and really understanding the priorities for both you and your student when it comes to, a post-secondary institution, or even if they're looking for a job right out of school, like what is most important to you, what is most important to them. And a lot of times, once you figure out with your student what you value and what they value, a lot of times that will take some colleges, institutions, jobs right off the list. And the list will organically come to shape. And for those of you who have been through this before with older siblings, you'll also know that once you get to the second half of your junior year and have your junior conference with your counselor, they will be happy to provide, a list with you and talk through some things about potential colleges. But I'm talking about right now. If you're really interested in trying to start slowly figuring out that college process and figuring out, what's important to students, really that's it. What's important to you and what's important to your students can help navigate the start of where to start looking at colleges. If the student knows what they want to do, and it's okay if they don't because they are still only sophomores, rising juniors. If they know what they want to major in, that will organically shape your list as well. And having that conversation, is this major realistic for your student? You know, what kind of grades are they looking for? Is the student holding those grades right now? And a lot can change and shift over the year as students go through junior year and as they continue to take classes and their rigor in their classes. So a lot can change, but like, where are they at right now? And can those majors be a good academic fit? Can some of these schools be a good academic fit? Knowing that it can change. So that's why I always go back to the values and what you prioritize, because the list will organically shape itself if you all know that. Another important thing to begin to speak about, and again, we call it the college process because it is a process and it can change over the course of time. But what region do they want to attend college in? Do they know they want to stay on Long Island and they want to stay home? Do they know they want a city? Or do they, want to go way out west to California? What does that look like for the student? And beginning those conversations slowly right now can help build into that bigger conversation that happens with the counselor at the end of junior year. And if you have some of these prior conversations and supporting the student and preparing them for that moment, those conversations can be really, rich and fruitful at the end of their junior year. Okay, so if your student, shifting gears a little bit, if your student doesn't already have a meaningful relationship with their school counselor, I suggest that, they come down, they make an appointment, they just come down to say hi. Your counselor is really pivotal and really important when it comes to, the student's junior year and moving on beyond Schreiber. They're the ones that discuss, post-secondary options with the student. They will write a letter of recommendation for your student for college, and they can help navigate any course rigor questions and any of that and help point them in the right direction for certain resources. So if your student doesn't already have a relationship with their counselor, I suggest that they kind of either make an appointment or come down and just say hi so they can begin to get to know them. And then junior year, the last thing I want to kind of wrap up with today is junior year is really about research. It's about collecting continual information. There's no final decisions being made in junior year, except maybe, whether they want to go to college or go career seeking, but even that could change during your junior year. But my biggest piece of advice is, to continually just collect information. Research is huge when it comes to this process. And we talked about organization last time, and talking to your student on how you're organizing all this information and what you're going to do with it and how you're going to use it. But, there's a lot of colleges out there, there's a lot of jobs out there, there's a lot of majors out there. And how do you figure out what you want to do? And it's really collect information and find out more about it. So if a student thinks they want to go in a certain, direction, I would start collecting information about it now, even the beginning of junior year, just to kind of get a sense of what does that look like. And really laying it out to see if you and your students think it's still a good idea, if the student still has passion to go in that direction. But yeah, I would say, between there's college fairs next year, there's, so much opportunity to get information for students. And now with social media and websites and, colleges post a lot of things online, collecting information has become a little bit easier. But we also talk about the information overload. There's also a lot of information out there. So how to organize it, but collecting it is the first step. And then really, distilling it and going through it with your students to see if some of these are really good options for them. And the last thing I want to finish with, and then if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them with the last minute or so. If you're sitting here and you are like, my student is a rising junior, their second semester sophomore, and we have not even begun to think about college or job seeking, you're not late. You're not late at all. It's great that you are on this call. It's great that you're listening at a later time to get the process rolling. a lot of it does not begin to take formation and action until the spring of their junior year. So standardized tests is something we want to look out for, in the fall of their junior year, getting prepped and getting ready to take them, or the PSAT. But besides that, a lot of this stuff can be done spring of junior year. What we're talking about today is just preemptive things like, can you begin it earlier? Can you begin the conversation earlier? So that way you can get a head start on it. But by no means is anyone late to the game here if you have a sophomore who's a rising junior. These are all just things to start thinking about and really start spinning your wheels to see what's possible for you and your students. All right, so that brings us to time. I thank you for joining us today, and I will see you all in May. Have a great day.
Thank you.